Imagine spending decades believing that youth is the peak of life. Society tells us that we must make the most of our 20s and 30s, build a career, start a family, seek recognition. But what if all of this was just a rehearsal? What if, in reality, life only truly begins at 40? Carl Jung, one of the greatest psychologists of the 20th century, had a very different perspective on aging. To him, the first 40 years are merely a phase of preparation, a period in which we absorb beliefs, follow imposed patterns, and seek external success. But none of that defines who we truly are. It is only the foundation for something much greater. In the early years of adulthood, we constantly shape ourselves according to external expectations. We grow up hearing what we must do to be successful, and spend much of that time striving to meet that ideal. We build an identity based on what others expect from us, being a successful professional, establishing a stable family, fulfilling a role in society. And often, we don't even question whether this truly makes us happy. But then comes a turning point. As we approach 40, something begins to change. What once seemed essential starts to lose its importance. Climbing the career ladder at any cost no longer feels as gratifying. Seeking others' approval stops being a priority. A discomfort arises, a silent question. Is this all? Is life just about this? Many interpret this moment as a midlife crisis, but Jung saw it differently. To him, this transition is not a sign of crisis, but of evolution. It is when we begin to look inward and question our choices, not because we have failed, but because we are ready for something deeper. Up until now, we have lived according to a script we did not write. Now, we have the opportunity to start a new story, our true story. And this is precisely the moment when the journey of self-discovery begins. But what happens next? How does this shift impact the way we see life? And what does it really mean to start living at 40? Until the age of 40, we spend most of our time chasing what we were taught to be important: financial stability, professional recognition, an active social life, and often building a family. We do all of this by following a model that was already in place before we were even born, as if there were a universal script for success. But then, something happens. We reach this stage and realize that external achievements do not fulfill us the way we imagined. The goals we pursued so intensely no longer bring the same satisfaction. It's as if we had been climbing a ladder for years, only to reach the top and realize it was leaning against the wrong wall. And that's when an awakening begins. Carl Jung described this phase as a crucial transition in life's journey. Until this point, we have spent much of our time constructing what he called the persona, the social identity we present to the world. This persona is shaped by the expectations of family, culture, and society. We want to be accepted, to be well regarded, so we adjust our way of being to fit these molds. But the persona is not our true self. It is merely a mask. And when we reach middle age, the cracks begin to show. Something inside us whispers that there is more to life than simply following an imposed script. We start questioning whether what we have done so far was truly out of personal desire or merely to meet others' expectations. This questioning can be uncomfortable. Many people feel fear at this moment because they realize they do not know themselves as well as they thought. That successful professional, that dedicated mother, that exemplary husband, are they merely roles we have been playing? What lies beyond that? Who are we when no one is watching? This is where transformation happens. Instead of viewing this phase as a crisis, Jung invites us to see it as an opportunity, a call to look within and discover who we truly are. But this change does not happen overnight. Often it starts with small signs, an increasing discomfort, a feeling of emptiness even in the midst of achievements, a longing for something deeper. It may arise in unexpected moments, while looking in the mirror, questioning a relationship, or reflecting on happiness on an ordinary day. And once these questions arise, they do not disappear. On the contrary, they grow stronger. What once seemed like mere restlessness transforms into an urgent need for change. Reaching the age of 40 is not merely a chronological milestone, but a true turning point in life's journey. Until then, much of our time and energy has been dedicated to building an identity that, more often than not, has been a reflection of external expectations rather than an authentic expression of who we truly are. During youth, we are encouraged to follow a predefined path: study, find a promising career, build stable relationships, achieve recognition, and maintain an active social life. This cycle repeats like a machine, and we rarely stop to question whether this model truly belongs to us. However, as maturity approaches, a silent discomfort begins to settle in. What once seemed like the formula for success starts to lose its strength, making way for an internal restlessness that at first manifests subtly but gradually becomes impossible to ignore. Carl Jung saw this moment as the beginning of a process called individuation, which is nothing more than the path to becoming whole, a process of integrating all the parts that make up our being. Until this point in life, we have been conditioned to project an image that meets societal demands, whether in the professional, social, or family sphere. We create a social self, the persona, a character we play to be accepted and validated by others. The problem arises when we confuse this persona with our true identity and live only to maintain this facade, ignoring the deeper aspects of our own essence. Then, when we reach this point of transition, the cracks begin to appear. We realize that there is something beyond the roles we play, something more authentic that needs to emerge. This realization can be uncomfortable because it forces us to confront a part of ourselves that we have neglected for years, our true identity, the one that has been buried under layers of expectations and social conditioning. This is the moment when we face what Jung called the shadow, the unknown side of our psyche, where we store everything that has been repressed throughout life. The shadow contains the desires we ignored, the feelings we learned to hide, the emotions we suppressed out of fear of judgment. Facing it is no easy task, as it requires courage to look at oneself without filters or masks. However, it is an essential step toward freeing ourselves from the chains of the past and beginning to live more authentically. What many call a midlife crisis is nothing more than this internal struggle between the self that was built to please others and the true self that longs to be expressed. This process does not happen suddenly, but rather gradually, often starting with small doubts that arise during moments of reflection. It could be a day when, looking in the mirror, you realize that you no longer recognize yourself, a conversation that sparks a deep question, a decision that once seemed unquestionable and suddenly becomes uncertain. These small signs indicate that something within us is ready to change. The problem is that not everyone is willing to accept this change, as it involves letting go of old certainties and stepping into unknown territory. At this point, many people resist, trying to hold on to the past, attempting to keep intact the identity they have built over the decades, even if it means living a life that no longer represents them. But the truth is that resisting this transformation only prolongs suffering. The more we try to cling to a model of life that no longer serves us, the heavier the weight of dissatisfaction and anguish becomes. The path to true freedom does not lie in avoiding this change, but in accepting it. What Jung teaches us is that this process should not be seen as a breakdown, but as an opportunity. Individuation is an invitation to leave behind everything that does not truly belong to us, and begin to build a life that aligns with our deepest essence. Throughout life, we are trained to measure our worth based on external achievements. From an early age, we learn that success means having a good job, a respectable status, a comfortable bank account, and an active social life. But as we reach middle age, a new reality imposes itself. These achievements, which once seemed fundamental, begin to lose their shine. What once made us proud now seems superficial. What once drove us no longer makes much sense. This shift in perception does not happen overnight, but it intensifies as we approach 40, a period when priorities begin to reorganize almost naturally. Carl Jung believed that this transition is part of the individuation process because, until this point in life, we have been focused on building an external identity, what others see in us. The pursuit of social validation, recognition, and acceptance guides our decisions, even if unconsciously. But upon reaching middle age, a different need arises, not to prove something to the world, but to find a deeper meaning in our own existence. This period marks a crucial turning point. Life ceases to be about what we have or achieve and starts to be about who we truly are. Many people experience this shift intuitively. Suddenly, That promotion that once seemed so important no longer brings the same satisfaction. Social status loses relevance. External opinions stop being a decisive factor. Instead, we begin to value aspects that were previously neglected, such as the quality of our relationships, emotional balance, and physical and mental well-being. We begin to ask ourselves, what truly matters to me? What makes me feel alive? What kind of life do I want to build from now on? This change in perspective is not just a psychological phenomenon, it has biological foundations. Neuroscience studies show that as we age, our brains become less reactive and more reflective. Emotional centers become more balanced, making us more capable of dealing with challenges without being dominated by impulses and anxieties. This gives us the opportunity to see life with greater clarity and make decisions that genuinely reflect our values rather than merely reacting to external pressures. However, this transition can also be uncomfortable. Many of us have spent years or decades following a path without questioning it deeply. When we realize that this path no longer serves us, a feeling of uncertainty may arise. After all, if everything we have fought for no longer satisfies us, what should we do now? This is a moment of great vulnerability, and that is why many people try to ignore or resist this change. Some try to fill this void with distractions, impulsive purchases, drastic lifestyle changes, new relationships without real purpose, while others fall into the trap of conformity, convincing themselves that it is too late to change. But the truth is that this phase of life does not need to be seen as a problem. On the contrary, it can be seen as an awakening. It is a moment of revision, an invitation to reorganize priorities and align life with what truly matters. And this alignment does not mean abandoning everything that has been built, but rather adjusting the focus. It means choosing relationships that nourish rather than just fill time. It means investing in experiences that bring meaning rather than just status. It means rediscovering simple pleasures, cultivating moments of presence, and learning to value the journey as much as the destination. The question is, how can we navigate this transformation consciously? How do we deal with the insecurities that arise in this process? And more importantly, how can we ensure that this change leads to a more authentic and fulfilling life? Reaching 40 with the feeling that something needs to change can be frightening. For decades, we have built an identity based on what seemed right: a solid career, a structured family, a predictable routine. Everything appeared to be in place, but suddenly, a restlessness emerges, a silent discomfort that makes us question whether the life we have lived so far truly reflects who we are. This feeling, often labeled as a midlife crisis, is neither a breakdown nor a sign of weakness, but rather a natural process of growth. Carl Jung described this phase as an essential moment for the evolution of consciousness. He believed that the first half of life is dedicated to building the persona, that social identity we develop to be accepted and recognized in the world. But there comes a time when this persona no longer fully represents us, and then a conflict arises. Do we continue living according to external expectations, or do we dare to seek our inner truth? This dilemma may seem uncomfortable, but in reality, it is a call for transformation. This transformation begins with a dismantling, a process of deconstructing what no longer serves us. Jung and other developmental psychologists refer to this as a symbolic death, not in the literal sense, but as a farewell to old versions of ourselves. For many, this moment may be accompanied by major changes, such as the desire to switch careers, reevaluate a relationship, or even question values that once seemed unquestionable. This need for change does not arise out of nowhere. It is the result of years of growth and accumulated experiences. The problem is that we are not always prepared to face this new reality, and that is where fear arises. The fear of change is natural. We have spent so much time building this identity that when we realize it no longer represents us, we feel as if we are losing something. But the truth is, we are not losing anything essential. We are simply freeing ourselves from what no longer belongs to us. This may mean letting go of old behavior patterns, limiting beliefs, or even relationships that no longer make sense. Often we get stuck in the illusion that we have invested too much time in a particular choice, and therefore, we cannot change it. But continuing down a path just because we have come too far is one of the biggest mistakes we can make. What Jung teaches us is that this phase of life should not be met with resistance, but with acceptance. The individuation process requires that we integrate all parts of our being, not just what we show to the world, but also what we hide from ourselves. This includes our insecurities, our unfulfilled desires, our fears, and even our unexplored talents. Middle age is not a period of crisis, but rather an opportunity to finally be who we truly are, without the need for masks or disguises. This does not mean that the process will be easy. Dismantling the old identity can be painful, as it requires courage to face truths we may have avoided for years. But at the same time, it is deeply liberating. When we begin to let go of the need to meet external expectations, we become lighter, more authentic, and more aligned with what truly matters to us. Life ceases to be a script to follow and becomes a continuous creation, where we have the freedom to choose what makes sense for us. Which brings us to an essential question. How do we rebuild life from this new understanding? After recognizing that we want to live more authentically, how can we make decisions aligned with this newfound awareness? And most importantly, how can we turn this transitional phase into a period of true growth rather than just a fleeting moment of questioning? If the first 40 years were a period of learning, adaptation, and building an identity focused on the external world, from this point forward, life invites us to look inward. This awakening does not mean abandoning everything that has been built, but rather redefining each choice, each goal, and each relationship from a new perspective, that of self-knowledge and authenticity. After realizing that much of what we have done so far was guided by external expectations, an inevitable question arises. What now? What do I do with this new awareness? The first step in this reconstruction is learning to differentiate between what was imposed by society and what truly resonates with our essence. Until now, many of our choices were made out of a need for acceptance, fear of judgment, and the illusion that following a certain path would guarantee happiness and fulfillment. But as we move through this transition, we discover that true satisfaction does not come from following an external script, but from living in alignment with what truly holds meaning for us. This requires a process of self-exploration, in which we must ask ourselves, what do I truly want? What makes my heart race? What values genuinely matter to me? Carl Jung believed that this phase of life represents the opportunity to integrate all parts of our being. This means embracing not only our qualities and talents, but also our fears, insecurities, and repressed desires. Many spend their lives running from these aspects of their own psyche, but Jung teaches us that only by recognizing them can we become whole. Individuation, as he described it, is not about becoming someone new, but about fully becoming who we have always been, without the masks we were forced to wear throughout life. From this new understanding, priorities naturally begin to change. If before, we were concerned with having more money, more status, more recognition, now we seek to be more connected with ourselves, to be more aligned with our truth, to be more present in the moment. Relationships also undergo a natural filtering process. At 40, there is no longer patience for maintaining superficial connections or friendships based on convenience. We begin to value quality over quantity, choosing to be around people who truly add something to our journey while leaving behind those who keep us tied to outdated versions of ourselves. Another important aspect of this reconstruction is how we perceive time. During youth, life is lived in a rush. There is an urgency to achieve, to prove, to accumulate. But upon crossing this symbolic midlife threshold, we realize that time should not be spent merely chasing goals, but rather lived with presence and intention. This realization leads us to seek experiences that bring genuine fulfillment, to slow down when necessary, and to let go of guilt for not constantly producing or competing. Many are surprised to find that after this transition, life becomes much more enjoyable. Studies show that people over 40 and 50 often report higher levels of satisfaction and well-being than younger individuals. This happens because, over the years, we learn to manage emotions better, set boundaries, and focus on what truly matters. The anxiety that once drove us in youth is gradually replaced by a serenity that allows us to experience life more fully. This is not about settling, but about living with more intention and meaning. Carl Jung once said that the most terrifying thing for most people is to accept themselves completely, but that this is also the most liberating experience. When we finally stop trying to be something we are not and embrace all facets of ourselves, we find a kind of freedom that no one can take away. This is the true reward of this journey, the ability to live without needing external validation, the courage to follow our own path, and the wisdom to know that life truly begins when we stop merely existing and start truly living. At 40, we are not reaching the end of anything. On the contrary, we are approaching the best part of life, the part where we finally become the authors of our own story. And now that this journey of understanding has come to an end, the big question that remains is, are you ready to truly live? If this video resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us continue bringing content like this and reaching more people who need to hear this message. Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts and how you perceive this phase of life. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.